All right, so today we're going to take a look at a new book of the Bible, new story. Last week we talked about Ruth and the tail end of the Judges section. Patrick O'Toole, the Judges section, and so that's going to lead us into our next book of the Bible here that we're going to look at, and that is going to be Samuel. Share Samuel. There you go. 1 Samuel. I'm going to tell you this right now. 1 Samuel is sneaky great. Hashtag sneaky great. I'll put little Twitters here for everybody. Hashtags for all my little topics here that we're going to talk about. 1 Samuel is a great book. If you're ever like, I'd like to read more of the Bible, you could do a lot worse than starting with 1 Samuel. It's got a lot of interesting things happen. It's really brisk. It has a lot of stories in there. 3 main characters plus God. God's always the main character. Samuel, Saul, and David. And we're going to take a brief look at all 3 of those guys tonight for confirmation. So that is a sneaky great book. All right, so first up, the people of Israel get the worst gift ever because they are fed up with the judges situation. They want a king like every other nation. So I have my worst gift ever. If somebody tried to make you Cookie Monster cupcakes, and that's their, nailed it. You know, that's their Pinterest fail right there. So God tells them, okay, you want a king? You expect it to look like the top? It's going to look like the bottom, but fine. Get yourself a king. So he tells Samuel, Samuel's the last judge, or last judge, he's not the last prophet, but to go get them a king. And so Samuel follows God's point of view and anoints Saul as the first king of Israel, this guy named Saul. And so first, we're going to look at this. So that's their gift. What's your worst gift ever? You can type in the chat your worst gift you've ever gotten. Certainly clothes probably when you're a kid. I had a mom's friend who would always make us sweaters. I lived in San Antonio, Texas. Never wore it. It's 80 degrees every day. Who wants a sweater when you're 7 years old? A knit sweater. Come on. All right, so this is here. Samuel has crowned Saul king, and it's time to present him to the people of Israel. So I'm going to read this for us here about what Samuel does when they're there. So Samuel summons the people to the Lord at Mizpah and said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I've brought Israel out of Egypt, and I have rescued you from the hands of the Egyptians and from the hand of all the kingdoms that were oppressing you. But today you have rejected your God, who saves you from all your calamities and your distress, and you have said, 'No, set a king over us.' Now, therefore, present yourselves to the Lord by your tribes and by your clans." So God is not happy about this situation, but he's saying, hey, if you want a king, get yourself a king. Samuel brought all the tribes of Israel near, and the tribe of Benjamin was taken by Lot. He brought the tribe of Benjamin near by its families, and the family of Matrites was taken by Lot. And finally, he brought the family of the Matrites near man by man, and Saul, the son of Kish, was taken by Lot. That means kind of they rolled dice, and they landed on Saul. But when they sought Saul, he could not be found. So they inquired again of the Lord, did the man come here? And the Lord said, see, he has hidden himself among the baggage. Then they ran and brought him there. When he took his stand among the people, he was head and shoulders taller than any of them. And Samuel said to all the people, do you see the one the Lord has chosen? There's no one like him among all the people. And all the people shouted, long live the king. Look, if there's any situation where you're like, this guy is going to be in charge, this woman's going to be in charge, and you're like, where are they? And they're hiding in a suitcase, that's going to be a major red flag. Okay, that's a big deal of like, maybe this isn't the right guy for us. But Saul is really tall, and he looks really impressive. He's big, he's strong, head and shoulders taller than anybody else. That's a tall guy. So if the tallest Israelite is 6 feet tall, man, Saul must be like 6'8". That's a pretty big guy. So he's bigger than everybody. All right. But quickly after crowning Saul king, Saul leads the Israelites to military victories. He's a strong military warrior, but he also leads with dishonesty, pride, lack of integrity. So he has some quick military victories, and then he stops listening to God and to Samuel and starts doing whatever he wants. And God and Samuel talk, and God's like, no, we're done with this guy. He is not willing to humble himself before God. I'm over Saul. So God renounces Saul and his family line and tells Samuel to anoint a new king, David. And he says, David is a man after God's own heart. So we're done with Saul. We're going to go with David now. And that's the statue of Michelangelo's David right there. Pretty impressive. So for a period here, Saul is still king, but David is going to be the next king. And so for the back half of Samuel, it's kind of this weird, who's really in charge? Because Saul is king, but David has been proclaimed king by God. And Saul has a son that should be king, but God says, no, your son, Jonathan, is not going to be king. It's going to be David. So the rest of 1 Samuel is about the rise and fall of Saul and the rise of David. Now, David will have his own fall, but that will take place in Samuel 2. So let's move on here. All right, so my dumb bet. Here we go. So in Samuel 17, probably the most famous section of David, and maybe one of the most famous stories from the Bible, this idea of David versus Goliath. So the Israelites and the Philistines are at war, and they're kind of in this valley. So the Israelites are on one side of the valley, the Philistines on the other side, and they're going to go down to the middle of the valley and like have this battle. And nobody really wants to do that because nobody wants to die. So the Philistines have this idea of they're going to send Goliath out, their champion, who's a giant. His height is 6 cubits and a span. That sounds pretty tall. He's got a bunch of armor. It's heavy. He looks like a warrior. He's a big, burly dude, and he's ready there. And he's going to challenge them every day and shout across this valley and say, here's how it's going to work. You send out your champion. I'll fight them. If they beat me, the Philistines surrender. If I beat them, you guys surrender. That's the way it'll go. Nobody else has to die. We'll just send out our 2 champions. So that's the call across to the Israelites. And every day the Israelites hear this and nobody volunteers to go. They're all like, oh, I don't want to do that. That guy's really big. He's giant. So nobody wants to go fight him. So that's this one. All right, but David shows up because David is sent by his dad to go to the front lines because he's bringing sandwiches to his brothers. And David overhears this. Now remember, David at this point has been claimed king of Israel, but he's not king yet. He's just a kid, kind of waiting in the shadows. So David says to Saul, that's the king, let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine. Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth. And if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Okay, so David is pretty impressive. He says, I'm ready to go fight this guy, and don't worry. I've killed lions and bears before. It's no big deal. And if the bear or the lion turns on me, I grab it by its jaw, and I hit it in the face until it dies. Yeah, that's a thing that David's doing. That's a thing, I guess, Israelite boys did. So Saul was like, okay, sounds good. You can go out there even though you're a boy. So Saul clothed David with his own armor, put his helmet on him, clothed him with a coat of mail, and strapped Saul's sword over the armor and tried in vain for it to walk, but he could not, for he was not used to them. So then David said to Saul, I can't walk in these, for I'm not used to them. So he removed them, took his staff in his hand, and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi, which is like a river, and put them in a shepherd's bag in the pouch in the sling in his hand, and he drawn near the Philistines. So he's like, okay. Saul gave him armor and a sword. He's like, I'm not wearing that. I'll take my sling and some stones, and I'm good to go. All right, so let's find out what happens. And I'll kind of paraphrase this a little bit. Philistine comes forward. He sees David. The Philistine's like, what's this? This doesn't make any sense. This is just a boy. Okay, but fine. You want to fight me? Let's fight. So there it is. Then David says this, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day, the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give you the dead bodies of the Philistine armies this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all of this assembly may know that the Lord does not say by the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, but he will come into your hands. So the Philistine drew nearer to meet David, and David ran quickly towards him, put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, gross, and he fell down onto the ground. When you're reading, David will take Goliath's sword and cut off his head. So yeah, that's one of the most famous stories in the Bible, this idea of David versus Goliath. And I love this story. I think this is a great story. Oh yeah, everybody hears my dog barking over there. Yeah, I think it's just an interesting story, and it's pretty popular. But we have some neat things. So David wins. David wins this fight. But for me, the questions I have is, should David have even been there to begin with, right? Saul identifies David as a boy, and the army is made up of adults and men, and Saul's their king. And this guy who's a giant is challenging them. And they're like, you know who we're going to send out? David, the boy, the child. Like, imagine if like your neighborhood had this bully driving around on a motorcycle screaming like, come fight me, somebody. And you, as like a middle school student, was like, yeah, I'll go out there. And all the adults were like, cool, have fun, go fight that guy. That doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense for them to do this, but they're scared. And if David is the one that they're going to send out, sorry, my dog, they're fine with that. But here's the thing. The Israelites have somebody that should go fight Goliath. They have their own giant on their side. Philistines got a giant. The Israelites have a giant, because we remember Saul is the biggest of them all. He's taller than everybody. Maybe he's not as tall as Goliath, but he's their biggest guy. And we know from reading Samuel, Saul is good at fighting. He knows how to lead an army in battle. He knows how to do those things. And then we also know from the story, Saul has armor and a sword, and most of the Israelites don't have those things. They're just kind of farmers, kind of conscripted into being going to war. So they might have like, you know, a rake or, you know, a spear or you know, or a staff. But they don't have like a sword and armor. Saul has all those things, but Saul will not go and fight. And I think that's so interesting, right? This idea that Saul, who is their king, he's the guy in charge, he has the training, he's the biggest, he has the equipment, refuses to go. And instead says, David, why don't you go? You should go fight. And that's what happens, I think, when we trust in Sauls in this world. And sometimes we can trust in Sauls, and like we trust in maybe leaders, or we trust in things that make us happy, or things that seem attractive or good, or that they're valuable or precious, and they ultimately let us down because they are not God. Because ultimately, those things are all kind of cowards when it comes to facing down Goliath. We need David to go fight for us. And sometimes it's easy to be like, well, I should be like David, but we already know too from the story, David is incredible. David's like a superhero. He kills lions and bears. He is offered armor and says, no thanks. And when Goliath is coming at him, David charges at Goliath. He runs towards him. He does not try to like hide. He runs at Goliath. David is incredible, because David isn't necessarily who we're supposed to be. David is who Jesus is in this story. We want to follow somebody who does something like that, and that is Jesus. That Jesus beats Goliaths. And we know that when it comes to Jesus, when we point to Jesus from this story to the future, the Goliath that Jesus slays are sin and death. By dying on the cross, he defeats the things in this world that we're ashamed of and hurt by, and he defeats the thing in this world that's scariest of all, dying and dying alone. And Jesus says, I've beaten that Goliath already. You do not have to worry about those things because I beat it. It's over. And that's pretty incredible. So David does teach us that when it comes to kind of like fighting like Goliath, Goliath kind of wants to fight with a sword and a spear and a shield. He kind of gets that. And David tricks him by fighting different, right? He fights with a sling and no armor. And that ultimately beats him. It's a little like rock, paper, scissors. That's the paper to Goliath's rock. But when it comes to like fighting like the world fights, sometimes the world tricks us as Christians to thinking, if we want to be powerful, if we want to be accepted, if we want to be important, we got to fight like the world fights. We got to be mean. We got to gossip. We got to fight fire with fire. If a bully is picking on us, you got to pick on them back. You got to be hurtful with your words and your tone when people are hurtful towards you. And David reminds us to really beat those things, you have to fight different. You do things different than the way Goliath expect you to do that. And that's how you succeed. Because as Christians, we know that what God has outlined for us, that when we're confronted with hate, we overcome it with love. And that is how we can beat Goliath in our life too. All right, so that's David and Goliath. I love that story. I think it's really interesting. It's probably one you know, but I really love looking at it over and over and over again. All right, so we're going to go to our small groups. And it's just 1 second. And Pastor David will finish up next week with the fall of David. Remember, 1 Samuel is the rise of David. 2 Samuel is the fall of David. So this guy is going to mess it all up. Spoilers. Some announcements. This Saturday night, in our parking lot, we are going to watch a movie. So if you're not doing it on Saturday, come to the parking lot. We're going to watch a movie up there. Bring a camping chair. Bring your favorite snacks. We'll have popcorn and drinks and things like that. But if you have a favorite snack, bring that to come watch a movie. One of my favorites, I think Chris reminded us last time that this one is called Schmindy and Schmones, or it rhymes with that. Yes. It's a good movie. If you've never seen it, you will enjoy it, I think. If you have seen it, you know it's good. Come on 7 o'clock on Saturday. So come and watch Indiana Jones. So I'd love to see you there. I know we've seen some of y'all come to the movies we've done. If you've never been, you will have a fun. Yes, it's this Saturday. Yes, this Saturday at 7.